Hey, folks, welcome to the show, Teach, Coach, Mentor, where we talk to, no surprise here, teachers, coaches, and mentors. And today I have Devika Toprani. Am I saying that right? Do I have your last name
Yes, you're
correct?
absolutely right. Yeah.
Okay, good. Really excited. We met on LinkedIn. You had made a post about a paper that you have in preprint called the Summographic Learning Method. And anytime I see anyone talking about teaching methods, I get really excited and I want to know more. And so we've talked a little bit, and I've read your paper, and want to talk about that today. But before we get into that, I want to know who Devika is. So please tell me a little bit about yourself and where you're from, and maybe kind of what led you to, develop this new teaching framework that you have.
Yes, thank you for having me, Michael. I'm Devika Toprani, everyone, and a little bit about me. I'm born in Oman. I'm brought up in Dubai. I've studied in India, and now I'm in the United States. I'm a global, I would say, a nomad. A lot of people tell me that, and maybe that's my edge in the AI era. And what led me to develop somographic learning? Somographic learning. It's more about, I would say, cognition, embodied learning, and using the hand to learn. That's
Mm.
that's what I believe, and I've learned about that way throughout my life. Since I was a child, I used to make sense of math and concepts and formulas and theoretical knowledge, all technical jargon using drawing, shapes, doodles. And maybe I didn't like reading textbooks. I don't know. But today, I think the whole world doesn't like reading 200-page textbooks because we have 3 seconds reels, right?
Yeah.
So that's a big gap that I noticed while growing up. And during my master's program, I'm a millennial, studied with big fat big fat textbooks, and now I'm studying, imagine, with Gen Z, uh, who prioritizes speed over understanding. If the
Yeah.
assignment is due at 11:59, they will start at 11 and submit it on time, dot. Uh, but I've learned differently, and that's what I guess led me to develop some graphic learning.
Okay. Yeah. So first of all, that sounds absolutely fascinating. Tell me about the differences, maybe just because I'm totally curious before we get to the somographic learning, about learning in Oman and about learning in India and about learning in the US. And I know that's very broad and you'll have to kind of paint with a broad brush
Yes,
there,
of
but
course. I love to
what,
get specific there. In
yeah.
Oman, I mean, imagine growing up as an immigrant in a Gulf country.
Yeah.
You don't know whether you're supposed to say that you're from India or you live in Oman, or
Mm.
that's the kind of identity I had. I had a kind of gap. What am I supposed to be? That's what I felt. And maybe that's how I learned to understand different perspectives. That's again how it led to somographic learning, because when everybody started scaling AI last year or before that, I was like, how will this affect people in the long
Yeah.
run? So
I think a
that
lot
was
of
the
people are asking
broad
that.
vision you get when you have that multicultural identity. You
Mm-hmm.
learn to think from other perspectives, and it's very natural that because you've lived so many countries. And
Yeah.
that's what is my edge in the AI era and what most people miss. Um, that's how I've come to this. And yes, I studied in Oman until I was about 7 years old. Then my family shifted to Dubai, and I started schooling at GEMS Education, the Millennium School Dubai. It was a CBSE school back then. Not really in touch with the school right now, but I studied from, I think, grade 2 to grade 11 at
Mm-hmm.
11 or 12 at the Millennium School Dubai. And I had a lot of, and you know how CBSE was back then, it was a lot of traditional rote learning. And as somebody who did not like textbooks, I felt overwhelmed with all
Yeah.
the text. And that's when I started sketching. A lot of my friends from there, whom I'm in touch with, they remember the doodler Devika back then.
Yeah.
And they tell me, maybe you were meant to do this. You were
Mm.
meant to create this framework because maybe back then it didn't make sense. Today it does because the whole
Yeah.
world needs it. So those are the kind of people who know the long journey up till what it is today. Then I moved to India. Mumbai, Maharashtra specifically.
Mm-hmm.
I did my and the interesting part was that I did not want to do a master's degree or a bachelor's degree. And here I am right now, after doing two bachelor's degrees and one master's degree, thinking of a PhD as well. So
Yeah,
life takes its turns.
it
Um,
sure does.
so I wanted to do a bachelor's degree at Mumbai University for time pass. Like, okay, I would do it, but I on the side focused on a diploma in early childhood education. I was more interested in how kids learn, and this was inspired by a movie called Tari Zameen Par. It's a Bollywood movie by Amir Khan, and not by Amir Khan, he's featuring in it, but it's
Okay.
about a dyslexic child who learns through doodles and things like that. And I kind of related with to that. I mean, even as a normal learner, I related to these concepts very early. I felt inspired by this movie to teach um, and take my career forward in learning and teaching
Yeah.
preschoolers. Uh, and after getting my diploma, I worked for a year um, at an IB school called Activity Infant School, and that was my first full-time job. I learned a lot out there, to be honest. I had a co-teacher whom I was working with, and it was great. Then COVID struck in the middle of that, and
Mm.
things went haywire. Imagine as a new teacher, just started off learning the ropes, COVID is hitting, learning and teaching is becoming remote. There
Yeah.
are challenges coming in where uh, parents are complaining because learning is remote. They have to take care of their kids at home while
Yeah.
making them study. Teachers don't know how to take this forward because they're not trained to teach in COVID. So, those are the kind of situations I faced. But that's when I learned to self study. YouTube was great. It was great resources because then how do I keep preschoolers engaged? Like 28 of them online on Zoom during this phase. It's
Yeah. I don't even
bad.
know how you keep one engaged, much less 28. Yeah.
So that made me feel frustrated because
Yeah.
I was not getting that satisfaction um, as a teacher, as a mentor, because your students in this environment are not happy. It's COVID.
Yeah.
I mean, they're not meeting their learning milestones, stalking
Right.
milestones, and it's not inspiring for me as an educator to do that, work
Yeah.
in that kind
W-
of field.
Was it
And
during that time that you started to work on the somographic method, or did that come later?
no, Sommographic came much later. I
Okay.
started, in fact, I copyrighted Sommographic Learning in November
Okay.
2026. But all this was like leading to that because the experience with preschool learners, it's one perspective. Then I
Right.
moved to higher education. I got a scholarship at George Mason University, and then came here and studied a Bachelor of Science in Psychology while working in HR at
Yeah.
George Mason University's Advancement and Alumni Relations.
Yeah.
And so that's like several different perspectives out there, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Then I got into my master's degree at University of Illinois while working part-time at the School of Social Work as assessment specialist and
Yeah.
working in accreditation as well there. Um, so again, that's too many different perspectives, and that maybe reflects on my work now. Yeah.
Okay. Well, so tell me more about the method then, and because I really want to hear about it. You've mentioned learning through drawing and through doodling, and I've read it, but I'd love to hear. I think the audience would like to hear your version of how you came about this and what it is, and how maybe we can all adopt it ourselves.
Yes. So the problem that I mentioned, uh, that learners are prioritizing speed over understanding.
Yeah.
When I would say, coming up with this method, I was a student
Mm-hmm.
while working as assessment specialist and an educator at the School of Social Work. So I had both sides of the coin,
Yeah.
the educator's coin side and the student's side. And I found that there was a barrier to entry.
Okay.
There was no problem with how professors are teaching now. It's amazing. AI is also amazing to scale, but where is the struggle to learn that was there as a millennial for me back in high school.
Yeah,
Without that struggle, learning doesn't happen. And
that's right.
that is what I've mentioned in my preprint as well. Um, Desirable difficulty is a big thing for learning. It's very important.
That's
Um,
right.
but combined to that, I combine my doodling experiences from my childhood, and I was like, should that work?
Mm.
Should there need to be a layer before existing teaching methods so that learners feel psychologically safe, interested, engaged to not use AI later? Like, not prioritize speed over understanding, to actually focus and strategically slow down the brain enough to get conceptual clarity and then move to AI for refinement? That was a question I had, and I was like, I want to research on this. My researcher
Yeah.
brain just switched on, and I was like, I want to do this. Yeah. So, yeah.
So is if I want to make sure that I rephrase this in a way that maybe everyone can understand is that doodling is a method by which not only can you help not only can it help you learn the subject or the topic that you're is currently being presented perhaps, but also it functions to effectively slow you down so that you are spending more time in reflection on what you're doing, and the medium by which you're expressing that is the doodling, right? But because it takes
Yes.
time and because it's a little bit difficult to do, you kind of create the desirable difficulties, but while doing something that you perhaps
Yes,
enjoy
and
on
it's
that new
just like
information.
mapping. It's like making connections. You don't need
Yeah,
to be an artist or Picasso for this, right? Uh, you don't need to be Picasso for drawing and writing. You can do it. And that's the reason I come to shape emotion grammar, because that part of it is, these are not rules. This makes entry safer
yeah.
for the learner. And
In what
that's,
way exactly?
I would say, a circle. And we did speak about bar and neta. All right.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Circle is not like, okay, it goes off your brain. No, it's not that you should use a circle. But we have circle time. We have mindfulness practices where we use circle to make somebody feel psychologically safe. And this
Mm.
is a method of making the learner feel interested at entry point. It is not replacing existing teaching methods, but it is a scaffold before that to make the
Yeah,
learner feel interested and create engagement, thus making it easier to dive deeper into concepts that can be taught later, which is just being taught now.
right.
So it is a missing visual layer before existing education.
Okay. I'd love to understand a little bit more about what you mean in terms of psychological safety in the classroom. And I ask because I don't know if I could really say that in a classroom I felt psychologically unsafe. So obviously people have
Oh,
different
not that way.
experiences.
Not that way. I'll give you
Yeah.
an example.
Please.
While pursuing my master's degree at Gay School of Business,
Hmm.
um, I would say that master's degree had the entry requirement to that master's degree, anybody could enter. Whether you are a
Hmm.
psychology bachelor's major or a history master's major, anyone could enter.
Okay.
You just required a quantitative science requirement before that in your bachelor's.
Yeah.
Now, if there are so many different bachelor's majors who are entering that master's degree, then wouldn't there be discrepancy on how much a person knows about that master's program, or
Oh, of course.
like prior
Yeah.
knowledge? So,
Yeah.
somebody who's in a quantitative science class but who has studied history and doesn't have any knowledge might feel, oh, I'm not going to be interested in this. I don't know how to learn it.
Yeah.
This makes entry safer, like the shape, emotion, grammar. Everybody starts together,
Hmm. Okay.
regardless of their academic background.
So if I'm a teacher and I have a classroom, or maybe I'm in a corporate environment, and obviously that I think that application actually might be even more understandable. In a classroom, there's almost, in most cases, some sort of a homogeneity in that if you're interested in a degree program, even if you don't all start in the same spot, the interest is there. But out maybe say in a corporate environment or in a business environment where you really do have people from a wide range and set of backgrounds and skills and abilities, like could you give me an example of if I was in charge of corporate training for a large event and a large set of people, what is the simplest version of something that I could implement from this system on day one that would, get things going and help build that scaffolding before the instruction starts?
Yes. So attempt, map, refine
Hmm.
works very well in corporate as well in higher education. And this is
Yeah.
very ironic because it's different. In corporate, you have many different cross-functional teams. You have HR, you have IT,
Yeah.
communications, social media, marketing. Now, each team has their own things going on. But if you have to report to the CEO of the company, who is a busy man or a woman, right?
Right.
How would you do that? How would you manage these things? But you also want to give the actual things that are going on in the company, not an AI generated template,
Right. Right.
right? So then you use the attempt, map, refine phase within each team, whether it's
Okay. So walk
communications,
can you
IT.
walk us and the audience through that? What is
Yes.
the attempt
So the
map refine
communications
cycle?
team, suppose you're doing it with them.
Yeah.
Now, in the team meeting, even if it's online or on in person, I mean, most teams are hybrid today.
Yeah.
If it's online, they could use their webcam and cam and think about what they want to do, or they could use Miro, right? Miro is a
Hmm.
great software. Canva is a great software for this kind of mapping, right?
Yeah.
And they could all do it together, and it makes thinking visible, right?
Hmm.
So everybody
Yeah.
knows what's going on. They can all come on the same page fast, but they do that before referring to AI, thereby maintaining their innovative capacity. The team knows what's going on, they are on the same page, because teams today are saying, okay, I want to use AI, I want to scale, but how? Do employees
Right.
know how to do that? Like,
Yeah.
what does scaling and using AI mean today? Where's the policy? How do I do it? So, this is brainstorming as a team. So, communications team brainstorms together, so does IT, and then it all goes to the CEO. Of course, after the brainstorming, you can take the minutes of the meeting, put it in AI, refine, and then give it to the CEO. This is what we have been working on, and this is the final
Yeah.
input and output.
So tell me, I'd like to dive into that a little bit more about how AI integrates, because a lot of folks would argue that, AI is useful as a thought partner. It is useful in the brainstorming phase. So how does it integrate from that perspective? Like in an academic environment, I'm 100% with you. We're seeing students immediately jump to AI. They're not entering the desirable difficulty stage, and they're saying, okay, what do I do next? What do I do next? What do I do next? And
Yes,
they
yes.
confuse recognizing correct outputs from AI as learning, and those are not the same thing. Recognizing the right answer and being able to produce the right answer are really two, there's a lot of distance between those two. But as far as, brainstorming sessions and working with other people, is there a similar issue with AI integrated that early in that stage, where it's helping you in that process as well? Should that be kicked down later in the road following some initial kind of human only brainstorming session?
In fact, the company PlayLab, the nonprofit organization, they reached out to me to test one of their apps and prototype on it. And
Yeah.
I'm grateful to them for that. I
Yeah.
am working on an app with them, not rather with
Very
them. I'm
cool.
going to submit it to them for testing. And it's
Yeah.
a very interesting process building an app. I'm doing that with my shape emotion grammar.
Oh, very
And I'm
good.
also looking for EdTech partners to kind of collaborate and build this app. My vision for this, to answer your question, is for the refine phase, and it does not exist as of today.
Yeah.
Attempt, map, we got up till there.
Right.
But refine, I need
Yeah.
EdTech's help from there. I need them to make it difficult, desirably difficult for
That's right. That's
learners.
the tricky part, right? Yeah.
Right.
Desirably difficult.
So,
It's so funny. We talk about this a lot, and it's so clear in the research that desirable difficulty is required, but it's really it's an enormously difficult optimization problem to make it exactly the right difficulty. Because if it's too difficult, people give
hmm,
up, and if it's not challenging enough, we get bored. And like finding that exact standing on the knife edge level of difficulty is, it turns out to be very, very challenging, right?
But that's what I love doing, in fact. That's what
Yeah,
we educators have to keep updating, keep improvising, and that's
agreed.
why we are lifelong learners. Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah,
yeah.
100% agree. So I sent this question to you beforehand. It's the one part that I don't really understand about the somographic system very well. So my background is in physics, and I don't
Oh.
know, I'm a very grounded kind of concrete kind of person, and sometimes I have trouble with abstract concepts. So
Hmm.
you ground a lot of the framework in this shape emotion grammar,
Hmm.
where, and you mentioned this earlier, kind of circles represent safety and triangles represent direction and so on.
Yes.
What is the connection there in a way that my idiot ape brain can understand? Because it sounds a little too abstract for me and less practical. So can you walk me through that? Is this when you're doodling? And I'm not a doodler, so I obviously need to start. What am I missing here to understand that connection,
Yes.
and especially
Uh,
as it applies to teaching and learning?
so the app that I'm creating with PlayLab
Yeah,
gives educators um, creates, I would say, a mind map using the shape emotion grammar for educators to generate an image. Like today, educators are generating a PPT and long text and jargon, but no,
yeah.
attempt is where the educator starts off with a visual,
Mm-hmm.
a simple visual, so that learners get a safe entry point into the concept to generate that understanding and engagement, to build that
Mm-hmm.
classroom discussion. So instead of that long PPT, I want the professor to put up that visual image, explain a bit, and say, what do you think about the idea?
Mm-hmm.
How does
Right.
this connect with your life today?
Mm-hmm.
And if you would see, with AI coming in, learning is becoming more experiential.
Yeah.
This would be an experiential entry point into learning.
Yeah. Yeah, I think experiential learning is, so we know from the research that your kind of preferred method of learning, it really doesn't hold up to the studies. For example, some people say I'm an audio learner, I'm a visual learner, so on and so forth. And it turns out that when you do a test, you take those people and you get a list or a survey of what they say they learn, and then you break them up and you put them into different groups, and you actually have them learn in those different environments, and then you test them on the back end that they all do about the same across all of the different mediums. So while you might have a preference, it's not tied to outcomes, right? You can learn
Yeah,
visually, you can
it's
learn
not.
otherwise. But
It's not. Yeah.
I do find on the experiential side, and I think you had said a phrase, I'm going to paraphrase it slightly, but it was something about embodied learning earlier. I
Yes.
do find that if you can take a concept or an idea or a process and physically embody it, that you do tend at least to remember it, with greater probability later on. So, for
Yes.
example, in the physics classroom, when we talk about forces, I have the students get up and push each other because you can feel the force, and like that physical contact and experiencing it in the real world, really grounds it in a way that just writing up on the board can't
Yes,
do.
exactly. And that conceptual clarity comes from making those connections.
Right,
That's the
right.
beauty of embodied learning. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and I would say that's why it's important. And the shape emotion grammar is just maybe to create the app, I would say, to
Mm-hmm.
give those visuals to educators so that it's easily accessible, learnable, more clear for students. Students are not going to use that shape emotion grammar. No.
Yeah.
Uh, yeah.
So that's more of a for teachers to be able
Yeah, those are
to
just perceptual cues,
set
I would
their
say.
visuals,
It's not
perceptual
it's not
cues.
a
Yeah.
rule or so.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. Yeah. Well, that's great. Thank you, Devika, for walking us through that. We've got time for one more question, and so really, what I want to know is where are you going from here? The paper's in preprint, and obviously you're working on the app, which is really exciting. Where else do you see this being implemented, and how are you getting the message out there? And then where can people find you and your work if they're interested in learning more?
I'm on LinkedIn as Devika Toprani.
Okay.
I'm on Substack as Soulful Learning with AI. That's a paradox. Um, And then
It's not,
I'm
it's not, I don't, I know you said that, jokingly, but it's not a paradox, right? Like, I think it's really important what you're doing, which is we want to embodied learning and we want human to human contact and ideas. But there is a route for AI to be involved. And if we don't talk about it and frame it, then people are going to use it in ways that detract from
Yes,
the
AI
good
isn't
parts,
going
right?
anywhere, but we need
That's
a
right.
scaffold before that, and that's what this is.
Exactly. Yeah.
This preprint is just the beginning, to be honest.
Yeah.
I'm open to piloting this work in EdTech with the app separately, in organizational strategy, in the way I mentioned with cross-functional teams, and of course with K to 12 and higher education. Um, and I have an OSF preprint for this, but in that I've added another document today, which is the pilot protocol document, which
Oh,
includes
wonderful.
all the
Yeah.
details for it. I just added it like a couple of hours ago, so this is
I was gonna
new.
say I missed that. I missed that in
No,
my
no,
prep
no. I
research.
added it
Yeah,
today
yeah,
because
yeah.
I got several requests for pilots, but they wanted some more clarity. Like,
Yeah.
this is a document which is very important for that. Yeah.
Very good. All right. Well, wonderful. Well, your LinkedIn and your Substack, we'll have all that linked in the show notes so people can go find
Yes.
you.
Yes.
And
I'm also going to be talking at WebCon, University of Illinois WebCon on April 9th.
oh,
So
wonderful.
if there are people coming there, you might end up seeing me and listening to
Yeah.
me out there. Yeah.
Very good. I wish I could make it out there. Unfortunately, I'll be at work a week from today, but I can't wait. Hopefully, it's recorded, and would love to
Yes,
would love to see that.
hopefully.
That'd be great.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, but I'd like to end by saying that learning is not AI made, it is soul made. It starts with the learner's struggle, and AI comes in later after that.
I
And
agree.
yep, that's my message to
Yeah,
you all.
wonderful. That's a great message, and thank you so much for coming on the show, Devika.
Thank you. Thank you.